How are we all? I'm just seeing the comment from Louise. I'm very, very sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, we're not going to be discussing anything particularly upbeat today either. I was going to discuss political violence in America in the stream. I was going to discuss Trump's role in it, but it was not going to be quite this. So for those who don't know, I'm sure you all do know, but just to reiterate, someone has targeted two Democratic senators in Minnesota, so state senators this is, and they succeeded in killing one of them. The other one is in hospital. Governor Tim Walz, who famously was Kamala Harris's running mate, has said he is cautiously optimistic that ironically, the first senator attacked and his wife. So what happened was in the early hours of the morning, as far as I can tell from the reports as they were coming out, sorry if the mic is quieter than usual, it's not on my end, sorry about that. The early hours of the morning, there was an attack on a senator and his wife. They are in hospital, fighting for their lives. And then a short time later, I think maybe an hour or an hour and a half later, again, as far as I can tell from the timelines, it's believed the same person, disguised as a police officer. It was noted at the press conference by the chief of police of Minnesota that if they'd have been in the room with them there, you would have thought they were a police officer. So in other words, it was a very good disguise. They even had an SUV that looked very like a police patrol car. So you would have believed they were a police officer, which allowed them to get close. And they, targeted another senator and her husband and unfortunately killed them. And so what I'm going to be discussing is the extent to which it may, and it may not, because this is an individual, right, and they can have any number of reasons, but the extent to which the rhetoric employed by the likes of Donald Trump almost encourages this sort of violence. I mean, Tim Walz made the point that violence is not how we deal with disagreements. But of course, that is not the view of MAGA. But there are potential, it's not just necessarily a random attack. In Minnesota itself, the state legislature is very, very evenly balanced. And it has been, I've checked it out, it has been for some time, between Republicans and Democratic senators. And more recently, where there has been a majority, it's tended to have been a majority of one or maybe two, and it has tended to be in favour of Democrats. But if I just put up this is, so they have what are called special elections. We call them by-elections, but the positions where they're vacant, and the latest entry here, which was 29th of April. A Republican candidate won, and it does say here they've not been sworn in yet. So the state of play as of yesterday, because I don't think this has been updated. I'm assuming this hasn't. I'm pretty sure this hasn't been updated today, because in fact there's no date on it. So it was 33 for the Republicans. So if they're reading across the total, they're 67. The next column is basically Republicans. There's like slashes and stuff because it's like the caucus. Not everyone's technically a Republican. It might be an independent Republican, for example, or just a conservative. But the Republican caucus had 33 seats. The sort of Democratic caucus, 34. And what has now happened is there's now one fewer Democratic senator, but also there's another one in hospital. So that effectively creates, and especially I suppose once this Kerry Heintzman, I think it is, Republican, is sworn in, creates a majority for the Republicans, and there's therefore a suggestion that in actual fact, regardless of any rhetoric, this may have just been done as a way of putting the Republicans in control of the state legislature. Because remember, it's like, it may not be it's a lone gunman, but there's other people presumably involved. Someone's just made a point there that it could be a professional job. Absolutely, it could be, because remember, as I said, they had a car that looks very, very like a police patrol car. It had the lights and everything. It looked very much, it would have fooled anyone, or at least most people, I would have thought, that it was actually a state patrol car. And the assassin as well was dressed very like a police officer, all the kit. The suggestion was that you would not be able to tell the difference. So it was, whether the person or anyone they were working with was acting independently, or whether they were, commissioned to do it, doesn't really matter. It was clearly a very professional job, and almost certainly with the aim of, bringing the balance towards the Republicans. We will see, won't we? We will actually see, because if there are calls for the Republicans to use their advantage now to push legislation which ordinarily would not have got through. See, what needs to happen now is state Republican senators in Minnesota really need to make sure that they don't push anything very controversial just to take advantage of this. We're going to see now the measure of them. We're going to see how honourable they are or dishonourable they are. Will they push legislation that they know would not have gone through were it not... In other words, will they take advantage of these killings? I did have a fear as well. I did have a fear that Trump, when he said something, would end up like he usually does, just talking about himself. Fortunately, he made a sensible statement where he attacked it, and also, attacked lawlessness and violent lawlessness in general. There is a worry that in the coming days, again, MAGA may try to use this to their advantage. We have had, over the past few days, a real police crackdown. In Republican states, they're really loving what's going on in California. And there's a tumble just today of Republican governors digging the National Guard out. They've got no issue. They've got absolutely no reason to use it. But they're loving the fact that they're waiting for an excuse to use it. So you have a situation where, there are Republicans. There will be some that are absolutely appalled by this, and will not seek to take advantage of it. But there are others who will. And it occurs to me we've had something very similar in the UK. I mean, we've literally had something similar. We have had MPs murdered, 2 MPs in the last decade. But I want to just take people's minds back to what happened around there. So, about 10 years ago, Joe Cox, a Labour MP, was murdered by a far-right extremist who shouted, in support of Britain First, which is a party so extreme that even Nigel Farage doesn't want to be associated with them. And there was, at the time, a lot of very divisive and hateful rhetoric in British politics. It was Brexit. Brexit was like, you had the thing where when Gina Miller took the government to court, because Theresa May wanted to be able to take charge of everything to do with Brexit without referring to Parliament. And the High Court said, no, you need Parliament to vote for this. And the Daily Mail came out with they published photos of all of the High Court justices that had been involved in the case and called them enemies of the people. And Tory MPs, Brexit supporting Tory MPs, were in on the act as well. And they were really being very divisive, very aggressive. Joe Cox is murdered. The Labour MP who succeeded her asked Boris Johnson, who was Prime Minister at the time, she asked him, to, because the language was getting really very bad, and MPs were actually at this point, because like in America, all right, we've found out here state senators don't really get a lot of protection. They don't get a lot of police protection. They are now, but they generally don't get that much police protection. But national senators do, and of course the president absolutely does. Whereas in this country, not so much. The Prime Minister, of course, does, but MPs in general don't really, unless there's a specific threat to them. They don't really have special police protection. So Tracy Brabin, who's now the Mayor of West Yorkshire, but at the time she was the MP who replaced Joe Cox, asked Boris Johnson to moderate his language. He said, look, we've already had violence. We've had a murder of an MP. Can we tone down this aggressive language? And Boris Johnson, absolute toad that he is, he said the best way to honour Joe Cox is to deliver Brexit, which was an absolutely disgusting thing to say. Now, the reason why I've put a photo there of Mark Francois is because he segued into it as well. In 2019, so Boris Johnson's Prime Minister, we're heading towards October the 31st, which is the day where if we don't get an extension to the Brexit process, we automatically drop out the EU without a deal. No deal. Chaos in Northern Ireland and basically everywhere else. And Mark Francois said on the issue of like violence against MPs, this is what he said word for word. As a principle, you should comply with the law. So when someone says, as a principle, you should comply with the law, there's a but coming, isn't there? Because you would just say, you should comply with the law. A legislator should say, you should comply with the law 100%. There's no qualifiers needed. So he's saying, as a principle. But why would you say, whenever anyone says, well, as a principle, I would do this, what you're saying is, in almost all circumstances, but I'm about to explain an exception to the rule. He says, but then he says, but, so there's the but. So as a principle, you should comply with the law, but as I understand it, people are looking extremely careful at the act to see what it does or does not mandate you to do. So this was the Ben Act coming in, because they were going to force Boris Johnson to seek an extension. And then he said, I think if we don't leave on 31st of October, this country will explode. He was basically encouraging members of the public, Brexit supporters, members of the public, who were violently inclined. He was basically giving them license to attack MPs, and then he would say, well, actually, it's the MP's fault for not delivering Brexit. That was what this was about. That was what this was about. And I see the same thing now in America. Do you not? It's the rhetoric. They can come out and condemn the violence all they like, but they're creating not just a them and us situation. We're not just talking about simple tribal politics here. You're talking about giving license to people who behave violently. I mean, look at what Trump's done. He's pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists. These are people who killed police officers. These are murderers, right? They tried to murder his own vice president. Some of them, I'm not saying all of the ones who were there were attempting to kill people, but they were attempting to take over the government. They were attempting to do that. They were insurrectionists. And he's pardoned them. He's also, when that former sheriff who was in prison for not violent offences, but fraud and corruption, he was released. He was pardoned. And the pardon secretary, the guy who arranges the administrative side of the pardons, said no MAGA left behind. The implication being, I said at the time, the implication being that if you commit a violent act in the interests of MAGA, you will be pardoned. I am wondering if this person acting today or yesterday, however you want to define it, I am wondering if they maybe thought to themselves, even if I get caught, because in situations like this, often when there's a shootout with the police, admittedly the police weren't able to corner them, they have escaped, right? So there's a manhunt on. But often with things like this, in America, we know how it turns out. It turns out with the attacker dead, right? Either shot by the police or they kill themselves. That's not happened. Now, maybe it didn't happen, as I say, because they weren't cornered. But you also wonder if they're thinking to themselves, even if they're caught and prosecuted and convicted, it'll be a federal crime. Before anyone goes on about that, it will be a federal crime. So it'll be a federal sentence. Will they be thinking that Donald Trump will pardon them? That's what I'm thinking. We don't know that. As I say, it could entirely be... Just get rid of that because it's cutting my head off. It really could be... okay, because it could just be a lone person, although the way... It really was a stunningly professional job. It's very likely they had other people helping them in on it as well. But nonetheless, it could just be a small independent group, couldn't it? It could. It might have nothing to do with Donald Trump. It might have just been someone who wanted to give the Republicans control of their state senates, so that, although even that is in conjunction with MAGA, because it's like they're thinking at the moment Trump is wanting to, maybe they are expecting Republicans with cover of Trump to pass a load of legislation to stack the odds in the Republicans' favour in future elections, with the midterms on in mind potentially. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, we won't know anything until they're caught, hopefully alive. But there it is. Right, I better catch on with some comments, hadn't I? Yvonne there saying, I'm worried that Reform would do this in the UK. I support it already did this in Liverpool, might be repeated in another city. Yeah, I mean, what we need to bear in mind as well, despite the fact that if a brown person ever commits an act of terror, well, first of all, it's classed as an act of terror in the news, no question about it. And Reform UK will be all over it. If it's a white fella, it's not an act of terror suddenly, is it? Like the riots last week, which are, let's just remind ourselves of what the official definition of an act of terrorism in the UK, I imagine it's the same everywhere, but in the UK certainly, it is an act of violence with the intention of political change. So if you commit a violent act, and that violent act is motivated by the desire to bring about political change, it is an act of terrorism. It doesn't matter how small the act of violence is or how large it is. If the aim of the act is political change or a desire to create political change, it is an act of terrorism. The riots last year, yes, we know some people just got pissed up and joined in, but from the people organising them, they were acts of terror. They weren't described as such because they were white people mostly. We had the situation in Liverpool. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that was described as an act of terror, was it? I mean, it might not have been actually, because I don't actually know that they had a political motive. But, when you've got white people doing it, it's never classed as an act of terror, even though it is. It's totally disgusting. But yes, Reform UK, the people involved in it it wasn't, although I point out the likes of Boris Johnson and Mark Francois effectively, like, they were really trying to stoke up. I don't necessarily think they wanted someone to attack an MP. I think the reason they were doing it was to make MPs scared. I think their motive, I don't think they wanted an MP to be killed or harmed. I think they wanted MPs to fear for their safety, and as a result of that fear, do what they wanted, which in itself is an act of terror. I mean, effectively, Mark Francois and Boris Johnson committed an act of terror because although they didn't commit a violent act, they tried to harness violence or the fear of violence for a political act, didn't they? Punator they're saying, I think of terrorism as an act which instills terror into the local and wider society, which is why I do consider the car parade terrorism. Well, yeah, but the legal, I mean, some terms, they'll have like an everyday term, and there might be several definitions of it in the Oxford English Dictionary, or the Collins Dictionary, whatever's your poison. But the legal definition. So if we're talking about a legal definition, it is specifically, it has to have those two elements, an act of violence with the intention of creating political change. If there's no motivation to commit political change, then yes, you can have people who want to terrorize people, and I can totally understand people calling that a terrorist act as well. If you're wanting to sow terror for whatever reason, like you may just want notoriety, you may just want to be the next Jack the Ripper, right? But it wouldn't, legally speaking, be an act of terror if you weren't doing it to achieve political change. You haven't got your background up for cool things though. So I do know that, yes. I am trying some different things out. I can get rid of it. I have multiple new toys. I wanted to get rid of it to be there. But, the VCam, which I've used for quite a long time, if I want to put images behind me, so like, for example, if I just let's just have, sorry, a little segue. If I stick this up there, and that means I can then move that down here. Oh no, I can't. Oh, it's not working. It's not working as well. Oh, never mind. Get rid of it. If I did it on the other one, I've got 2 cameras at the moment. I have 4 webcams in total. Oh, let's just get rid of this, because I actually don't need it. I have 4 webcams in total, all different ones, all different models for different things. The one I'm using at the moment is by far and away my most fancy pants webcam ever. I don't want to use all the fancy features of it. I want it for some, but not all. Like one thing, for example, it can do tracking, so it could go, oh, I might move over here. Oh, there you are. There you are. But that's not what I want. So, I've exposed my mess. Let's put it back. There we go. So it is a fancy pants webcam. But I am, because I'm looking at maybe doing some more streams in the day, at lunchtime, for a couple of days a week. Not next week, maybe the week after. But there we go. Find your lack of the Millennium Falcon disturbing. Do you know what? I'll tell you what is disturbing. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll hate this. So when I was growing up, I was very young in the 80s. So I had Star Wars toys. And I looked after my Star Wars toys. They'd probably be worth quite a lot. They weren't boxed. I mean, I used them. They weren't boxed. But they were well looked after. I used to clean them and everything. And then when I got a bit older, and I was into He-Man toys instead, and I had a small room. I didn't have room to store them. Do you know what I did? You'll hate this. I piled them all neatly by the bin so they get chucked away. All my Star Wars toys. Millennium Falcon, everything. Gone. You didn't know that at the time. We didn't know that. But there we go. Anyway, sorry. Back to sensible things. How many of those books behind you have I read? All of them. I do have some books I haven't read, but they're not on that shelf. I have 3 bookshelves. Not all of them are jammed with books. You can see the one down there that's just got plastic trays and some files on it. But all of those books I've read, those are mostly reference books. On the top you can probably see the Chronicles of Narnia, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a trilogy in 5 parts, Lord of the Rings books, Unfinished Tales, Silmarillion, Hobbit, a few other things, bits and pieces. The Bane trilogy, that's mainly Star Wars novels, although you can't see that's not in shot. Anyway, that's literature over with. Case in point, the Joker in The Dark Knight was a chaotic terrorist in the film, but his aim was chaos for the sake of chaos, still terrorism. Yes, but he still wanted political change. If he didn't want political change, then he wouldn't be a terrorist, in terms of our legal definition. But he did. He did want to achieve political change. He didn't want political control, but he did want political change. But there we go. The suspect in the Liverpool crash wasn't charged with terrorism offences or attempted murder. No, I mean, that was I think that might have been a different situation anyway, but it is what it is. But I mean, what is... Even, I mean, you know, if you're going to look at it from that definition point of view, even what's happened in America today, is it an act of terror or is it just political murder? It's probably, because we don't know the motivation. You know, I mean, I can say targeting 2 Democratic senators means that the Republicans take control, and that can be your motivation. And therefore, that would be an act of terror if that's the motivation. But it could be a coincidence. It could be that they just happen to be in Minnesota and they they may actually have a grudge. I mean, I, I've sort of seen a little bit of the background to the senator who was murdered. I don't know about the other one who was targeted, but the one who was murdered, you know, for example, she was one who advocated for change. So after the George Floyd murder by police officers, she was the one who really got on top of that and pushed for change in the Minnesota police force. So it may have been for that reason, but then I'd also need to know, so what was the other senator arranged with? So we don't know, but it is one of those things. If they literally just wanted to murder Democratic senators without any further motivation, it could be, because by definition, if you murder a legislator, that's going to achieve some sort of political change. But if it was specifically to give the Republicans control, it was absolutely an act of terror. Punator, they're saying, in his own words, he was a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do with one if he got it. Yes, but this might blow your mind, Punator, but I'm gonna suggest something to you, a counterpoint. It's just possible. It is just possible that the Joker either was lying about his motivations, or because he's clinically insane, almost fools himself, like a narcissist would. It is just possible that not everything the Joker says is the literal truth. But anyway, the assassin had a list of... Oh, this has been news for me. Assassin had a list of names and addresses of other Democrats and probably would have killed more if the local police hadn't turned up. I mean, I think the local police were very likely to turn up, but okay. So interesting then that it wasn't just about giving the Republicans a majority one. I suppose, actually, even if you did want to give controls to Republicans, like I said earlier on, there will be Republicans, and I hope there are Republican senators in Minnesota who will recognise that this was... that they would not want to seek advantage from murders. So maybe the reason they wanted to target many more senators was because, you know, to cover for any Republican senators who might not have voted for something extreme. Because that may be what they want. I mean, this is all speculation, we don't know. But that may be what they want. They may want Republicans to enact extreme legislation while they've got that window before the special elections, as they're called in America, would be held to replace them. And that takes some considerable amount of time, just like a by-election does in this country. I wonder if the attacker's from a military or law enforcement background. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it sounds to me from the... I'm getting the impression from the reports, and obviously in the last half hour I've seen no reports because I've been doing this. So you'll have to keep me up to date if there's anything new announced. Pygmalion's just said there's a part 6 of Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy not in my eyes. Yes, I haven't read that. It's a bit like when they ended Only Fools and Horses and they were millionaires, and then they... Why is it tracking me? It's doing it again. Why did it do that? Ooh, the little monkey. I thought I'd taken tracking off. Right, there we go. It's too fancy for me. It's got a mind of its own. This is like Terminator 2. Sorry, where was I? What did I read? Oh yeah, the Hitchhikers. You know, like Only Fools and Horses. So they made them millionaires. Then afterwards they brought out a few little episodes, didn't they? I refused to watch them. I was a huge fan of Only Fools and Horses. You know, I watched it before it was cool to watch it. Like in my household, my parents loved it, but only years later when they discovered it. I watched it from the very start. I watched the very first episode live. Well, not live, but you know, when it came out. They didn't film it live. But I refused to watch it after that. And it's the same with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. As far as I'm concerned, it's done. 5 books is enough. Do I have the... Or whatever that is you've said? No, that's not what it's called. It's called the Insta360 Link 2. It's a very fancy webcam. It's a good one. It's a good quality one. But it's very fancy. Anyway, let's get back on to politics. Urbane Legends, they're saying it could be to get a reaction for the No Kings protest today, so Trump can call a state of emergency, martial law, or whatever. No, I think it was far too well organised for that. something like that, you didn't need to even target a senator, I would have thought. Just a political murder of any kind. You could have, in fact, do you know what? They could have, if they could have just turned up and shot the crap out of the protesters. Now, whatever the reason was, they needed, because the trouble they went to, the immense trouble that there would have been ways to, because again, I gather state senators generally don't have, they're like our MP. I mean, our MPs are national legislators, but our MPs do not have police protection unless there's a specific threat. Like sometimes the police do become aware of a specific threat, and then the MP has protection until they deem that the threat has subsided. But in the normal course of events, an MP, like if I were an MP, I would still be living as I am now. I'd just have to keep going to London, but I wouldn't have any special security. You know, very senior members of the government do a bit. The Prime Minister certainly does. But so yeah, state senators apparently don't generally get police protection unless there's a specific threat. So it would have been possible without all this palaver potentially to shoot a senator anyway. They just wanted, they planned it so carefully to make sure that they could, they'd have the best possible chance of carrying it out, obviously. Because this was a hell of a lot of trouble someone went to. Does this mean I'm going to have to start wearing makeup? No, I've got this specifically so I don't have to wear makeup. If I go on to the other one, which is using the VCam on another web, you can see it's a mess. That's actually a decent webcam as well, but the lighting in here is shocking. Whereas this webcam, and it's because it's powered through software, this image you are seeing of me is not the direct webcam feed. It's going through another bit of software and coming into here, so it's enhanced a little bit. So there you go. If the federal government doesn't pursue any charges, state administrators could throw the bucket in with state charges. No, they absolutely are. Do you know, it is even possible that, just as I said when I went back to Johnson and Francois, you know, I'd be prepared to believe they didn't want harm to come to any MPs. They just wanted MPs to be frightened enough to do as they said. The same may happen here. We don't know that Trump or any of his acolytes want anyone to be killed. They may just want to, you know, use fear to stop people opposing them. Right? So I genuinely have no idea. Well, if I was to say I have no idea what Trump genuinely thinks about it, it's probably a lie. I think he probably doesn't care at all because he only cares about himself, right? Which is probably why the statement he gave out sort of had to be written by someone else, because you wouldn't have, if someone had said, Mr. President, and if they'd have given him the briefing and said, Mr. President, you need to go out and say something, just go out and say something, that would have gone badly wrong, I think. I think that would have gone badly wrong. He probably would have started talking about how it was a terrible thing, absolutely disgraceful, but, you know, if only these Democrats would get on board with the program, it wouldn't happen. You could see him saying something like that, couldn't you? So it's obviously been decided amongst those around him, yeah, we're going to write this down for you, Mr. President. In fact, I was asking, because it took some time for him to make a statement, didn't it? I think it took some time. I think a statement should have been forthcoming really quickly. So, and there might have been several reasons for it. Maybe it was just very early, right? But I think it took a long time for a statement to come out. And I had this image, you know, the Father Ted, where he's trying to train Father Jack to say either yes or that would be an ecumenical matter. It took a very long time. I have images of them trying to do that with Trump. You know, here's the line, because they didn't dare just give him the memo and out with it. They said, Mr. President, you need to read this. Can you read it to me, please? Can we practice? And then he probably went on about, you know, the big beautiful bill or something like that, right? And they go, Mr. President, you need to say it exactly as it's on the script. We've written it in crayon and everything. Do you want it in Sharpie? We can do it in Sharpie for you if you like. Could this give the Dems in the state a boost come the midterms? who knows how people perceive these things. I think what's more likely to give the Dems a boost in the midterms is the general violence against the public. I mean, this is, it's serious because they're senators. It's not just an attack on, and of course, it's 4 people. Remember, it's 2 senators, but it's 4 people, because a senator and her husband has been killed, and another senator and his wife are fighting for their life in hospital. So it's 4 people. But there may be many more. And it's serious because the reason why, you think to yourself, well, why is this more serious than the murders of other people? Because it's also an attack on democracy. They weren't murdered because of a gambling debt or something. They were murdered almost, I mean, Ken, sure, we don't know the exact motivation just yet, but it would be spectacularly unlikely to have been a murder that wasn't motivated by the fact that they were senators. So it's an attack on democracy. That's what makes it more serious. And, but there could well be many more people falsely imprisoned, killed, badly injured, in violence. I mean, yeah, so, I mean, if the Dems get a bit... Someone's saying, will the midterms even go ahead? I mean, we know that Trump doesn't want the midterms to be a free and fair election. I mean, that's clear. That's obvious. I do think he wants the midterms because, think about it, I mean, he models himself on Putin's Russia, right? Russia has elections. And you can vote for whoever you like in those elections, by the way. It's not that there's only one name on the ballot. It's not that there's someone with a Kalashnikov standing over you watching what box you tick. You can go in Russia when they have elections. You can put your mark by whomever you like. But they're not free and fair elections because if anyone ever rises... Putin doesn't mind standing against people who can't unite the country against him. That's fine. But if anyone rises, like Navalny was the last one, to challenge him, he'll just chuck them in prison and kill them. Trump, is looking at... So Trump will be looking at that. He will need elections. Although, I know he sort of talked about himself being the king, hence the fact that these protests are called No King's Day, because he's behaving like an absolute monarch. Absolute other things as well. But the... he will feel that he needs elections for credibility. But I also think he will want the midterms as well because his majority in well, actually the Senate and the House of Representatives isn't really very strong, is it? So surely he would like a stronger majority because then he can push for more extreme policies. If he's got tighter control over Congress, he can push further and faster. So I think he will want the midterms, first of all, for the credibility of his rule, because that's what it is now. He's not office anymore. He's not in office, he's ruling. And there you go. The rest of the world needs to think about life without the USA. That's the question. It's very difficult, though, isn't it? Because it's the largest economy in the world. It drives many other economies. I'm looking at, in this country, for example, we're looking ahead at the perilous state of the economy. We had the news that April, the economy shrunk by 0.3%. That was unexpected. But why did it happen? Because of Trump's tariffs. Wouldn't have happened without that. So Trump's already having an effect. You look at Israel's assault on Iran, that's raised... Even if you don't care about the loss of life, you'll care about the economic impacts. What's the result of it? Oil prices have gone up. That's straight away going to create extra costs for a country that needs oil, which is most countries. And you've also got, the risk of shipping being attacked if there's regional war. Very important shipping route goes right through the Middle East. So... And that's Trump as well. I mean, Trump didn't want anyone to bomb Iran. I mean, I know he has threatened Iran, but if he wanted to bomb Iran, he'd have done it himself, right? His planes are way better than Israel's. He's got B-52s and B-2s, right? Um, you know, he wouldn't have made an arse of it. Israel, remember, did almost no damage to the actual nuclear sites, according to reports. If Trump had avoided an assault on those nuclear sites would be in ruins by now. But, you know, his weakness is allowing those attacks, which is causing an economic hit. And this is what I was actually going to talk about tonight. You know, the way he's attacking California. California is a huge economy. That is surely the economic engine of the United States domestically. What's he going to do to America's economy? He's already damaging the world economy by destabilizing Europe, destabilizing them. And I know neither were stable when he came to power, but further, should we say, further destabilizing Europe and the Middle East and knackering global trade in general. Now he's knackering the biggest economy in America. How are those MAGA folk coming along with their cheaper eggs and gas? Because all I'm seeing is them going up, and I can tell you exactly why they're going up right now, along with everything else. Jay, they say, he doesn't listen to courts. Why should he listen to senators? Because he sometimes needs their votes. But if he had more of them, he wouldn't. And of course, because, you know, his aim, I am quite sure, at the midterms, will not only to stack the odds, and sometimes these contests are quite tight, so you don't have to stack the odds massively in your favour to just sneak a load. So I think he wants the midterms to go ahead. I think he wants to make sure he can get a load of extra senators. And he will also absolutely pay very careful attention to the candidates standing in them, because he will want to make sure he's got as many nodding dogs as possible in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Will the Israel-Iran war extend the Ukraine war due to Russia benefiting from increased oil prices? Potentially, but also potentially just in terms of the general chaos it will cause. The war creates chaos, and people like Putin take advantage from the chaos. Any conflict anywhere in the world, frankly, Putin will use to his advantage. But there you go. If California was a country, it would be fourth largest economy in the world, with a consequential drop in America yet. Yeah, it's huge, economic powerhouse. And Trump is attacking it, of course, in order to instill his political will. It's all about enforcing his ambitions to become dictator, the first dictator of America. But it's going to wreck the economy. You know, it's a ridiculous. I mean, the reason he's doing it is because it's such a safe state for him to attack politically. And there's all sorts of reasons to attack California politically. But economically, it's an absolute nightmare, surely. Putin's like Littlefinger with chaos is a ladder. I don't remember that line, but yes, possibly. But no, he does. I mean, Putin deliberately engineers chaos because he can take advantage from it. Trump is very like-minded. That's how he reckons he conducted his business affairs. Do mad shit and then try to take advantage from the confusion. That's what I mean. He's brought that to his political career, hasn't he? I'd refuse to believe he wasn't a Russian plant if he wasn't so incompetent. Is this Trump? Trump is absolutely. Whether you'd go as far as to say an actual Russian agent is another matter, because that would imply complicity. He may just be very, very easily played. In fact, we've seen how easily he's been played by multiple world leaders on camera. So you can well imagine that Putin talking to him off camera has been... And we know that Trump's had close links with Russia, like back to Soviet Union days. So, yeah. Flood the zone with shit, Steve Bannon. Well, yeah, you had... I mean, Boris Johnson had a similar thing with his gas, didn't he? And he was doing it as a joke and everyone laughed, didn't they? When he was just beginning his political career. And they were talking about all his gas. And he says, well, my strategy will be just to throw out so many gas, no one will know what to focus on? Oh, everyone laughed. Oh, what a wit. Oh, what a wag. Oh, you're I've forgotten his name now. What was that name of that famous Victorian wit? Forgotten, doesn't matter. Lost the moment, my aging brain. But Noel Coward, you'll be the next Noel Coward. Or I suppose I could have said Oscar Wilde. But but it wasn't. It was serious, wasn't it? It was like, no, I'm actually going to drop so many clangers. You do not know what to focus on, and that's what you do. And it is flooding the zone is exactly right. Two people actually said Oscar Wilde there. I was actually thinking of Noel Coward, but Oscar Wilde, is also suitable. It's yeah. Mark, they're saying California cannot leave the USA. No, we're just talking about the size of its economy. No, if it was separate. I mean, other people will mention when you say it as well, if it were separate, it wouldn't have such a large economy because part of its economic might is by being part of the USA as well, right? Because who would leave a massive economic powerhouse? So who would be stupid enough to do something like that? But the point is that California is a huge economic engine for the United States generally. And so, to brutalise it doesn't seem in the best interests of the US economy to me. And of course, as they always say, when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. Even though hitting California, you could argue, well, how does, at least that's not hitting the world economy. Well, it absolutely is. Because if the American economy suffers, the world economy suffers. And one easy way to explain that, if you're not aware, is so when any country's economy suffers, obviously, because there isn't really very much trickle down at all, people's spending goes down because they don't have as much money to spend. That includes on imports. So when you've got America, a huge consumer market, if their economy is not doing too well, ordinary Americans don't have as much money to spend. They're not going to spend as much. That includes our stuff and everyone else's stuff. It means they won't import as much. So yeah, even when you're talking purely domestic economic damage, that still causes tremors around the world. The world is only one nasty pneumonia outbreak at the G20 summit away from being peaceful. All the world's worst leaders causing trouble right now are over 70. Yes, but I'll tell you something. So if I were, and sometimes I've thought about doing this, but I think it's a bit negative, right? I have sometimes thought if I could imprison 20 people in the world to try to bring it wouldn't bring world peace, but to bring a more peaceful world, should we say? If I could target 20 people for imprisonment, I wouldn't kill them. House arrest even, whatever, but isolated from the rest of the world, right? Take them out of the public levers of power. I'm not sure that many of those 20 would be world leaders. I'm not sure they would, Putin would be in there. Trump at the moment would be in there. I'm not sure how many others would be, in all honesty. Because Murdoch would definitely be in there. Because he's going to live for... People keep saying, oh, it can't be long now. It can't be long now. He's living forever, I'm telling you. He's done a deal with the devil. He's got a Faustian pact going, mate. He is living forever. Peter Thiel? Maybe or maybe not. See, this is it, you see. Sometimes you focus on the most destructive people, whereas maybe all you need is I'm not saying he wouldn't be on the list, by the way, but sometimes it's easy to look. I wouldn't put Musk on the list at all. No. I think Musk can be dealt with, you see. If you could get rid of 20 people who are stunningly influential, Musk he is influential, but he's not clever with it. And to get better politics, the politicians can then bring some of the others to heel. Politicians could easily bring Musk to heel. He's not a problem at all. If the US government wanted to deal with Elon Musk, they could no problem. Some others are more difficult. Even though he's the richest man, not a problem. Because he's an idiot. If you wanted to find some criminal endeavour of his, I bet you it wouldn't take you long to do it. You want the organ grinders, not the monkeys. Yes. Quite a lot of the people that would be on the list, I probably don't even know about them. That's because, you know, I'm not an expert on geopolitics. I pay enough attention to be able to discuss it. But there will be people, you know, like Cox, for example. Like, you know, so there would be people you don't really know about, but they would be the people to target. Rob, they're saying India, Kashmir, Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, all getting fluid like early 20th century history, just followed by World War One. Well, I mean, you can find multiple cases when there's a shift in the balance of power. Yes, you are going to get chaos. And here's the issue. This is what I don't get about Trump, right? He is in charge of the most powerful country in the world. He has a plan, whether it'll work or not is another matter. He has a plan to become dictator of that country, right? And yet he wants to pursue a world model of multipolarization, which by definition means you have multiple influential blocks in the world. That's insane to me. That is insane. If I were so minded as Trump and I was in charge of America and I thought I had a plan to stay in charge of America for the long term, I would 100% not want to weaken America's power abroad. I would want to strengthen it, if anything. Absolutely, I would. I cannot understand but it's because his brain's rotting, isn't it? He's got several people, all with their own agenda, whispering in his ear. So what emerges, what emerges is chaos. Because he can't think for himself. He's got different people advising him, but they've all got their own priorities. Oh, it's end of civilization as we know it if we're not careful. I wonder how many of those 20 people will be replaced by other bad actors filling the void. Well, this is what you have to be careful of, you see. That's why you have to be careful not to just pick the 20 who are front and centre. It's the ones who really have that. Like in this country, if you want to know what really started the sort of post-truth, wasn't Donald Trump, wasn't Boris Johnson, right? If you want to know who started post-truthism in Britain, you look up Max Clifford. That's going back a long time. He's the one who started it. He is the one who got people to believe things that weren't true. I fell for them. Back then when you trusted the media more. Max Clifford in this country was the person who really started, and he did it deliberately. It was a deliberate ploy, saying Dacre, no, Clifford. It was a deliberate ploy to get people to mistrust politics. And he did it, he worked it on the politicians as well. Worked it on the politicians. But there we go. MBS in Saudi Arabia is a damaging figure. There are lots of damaging figures. You could probably come up with 1,000 that have a lot of power and are causing a lot of damage. But if you had to come up with 20, you'd need. Do you know what you'd need? You know that conspiracy theory thing where you got the paper behind them, the string and the pin, the map tacks. You'd need that sort of thing going on. You'd need the nexus of each one. You'd need that. Cadwallader opened my eyes. Oh yeah, Cal Cadwallader has been an absolute hero on this. But that's what you would need. You would need to put all of these, maybe 1,000 people there, draw the connections. What are the sources? That's why press regulation is urgently needed. It is urgently needed. I don't think we're going to get it urgently. But there we go. Trump is listening to Putin. That's why it's case. That's part of the reason why it's case. He's listening to lots of people. He's known. He has a lot of people whispering in his ear. He's one of those like Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was famous for listening to the last person who left the room. So people like Dominic Cummings would say at a meeting, he would stay behind. He would make sure he was the last person to leave because he would be the one who wanted the last word with Boris Johnson. And it happened all the time. You'd have a meeting with Boris Johnson, he'd agree a thing, we'd all agree, they'd leave, the meeting's gone, people are going, right, they're telling their staff, we've agreed this thing, this is what we're going to do now. Half an hour later, Boris Johnson saying, no, sorry, changed my mind. Why? Because someone went back into his office and said, Prime Minister, can I have just a little word, please? That's why. Trump will be the same thing. In fact, I'm not even guessing. I am sort of like relying on what people are saying. But there are plenty of people who describe that. Said before, there'll come a time when the Conservatives will switch on Brexit due to public opinion. Could they be too far gone that they don't switch? No. As soon as, like at the moment, because of the electoral system we have and because of the fragmentation of the vote, you now need a smaller section of the population to support you to win an election. You could do it on 30%. I mean, Labour did it. Remember, Labour got, it was under 34% of the votes, 33.7, I think, wasn't it? Or was it 34.7? It was a very low number. And they got a huge majority, remember. They didn't just win power, they won by miles. So, in theory, you could have won on 30% of the vote. And the vote will probably be more fragmented at the next election, certainly the way things are shaping up at the moment, unless Labour suddenly find a popularity bone, then because even though I keep saying, you know, some of the stuff they're doing, you know, they'll show the benefits of it and stuff like that, I absolutely believe that. But I still also believe they're going to keep cocking up the comms, right? So we're going to have a very fractured vote next time, could be worse than last year. And in a situation like that, you need a smaller share of the vote to win. But you still need a certain share. As soon as you've got 70% of the population who think we should go back to the EU, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily vote for an anti-EU party, but it would make it more difficult to be an anti-EU party. And again, just demographics is naturally tending that way. You know, Brexit was, the vast majority of Brexit support was amongst a particular group of elderly voters. There were some younger people, really not very many. There's more young people coming online. And it's not like conservatism. It's not like as people get older, they're more likely to become pro-Brexit. It wasn't about that. You were just talking about a generation of people who didn't remember the war, so they didn't remember the reason why European unity is so important. But they did remember life before the EEC, and they thought it was great. Why? Because they were all young, right? They were. I keep saying, they thought, oh, it was all right. We were all right before we joined the EEC. No, we weren't. We were the sick man of Europe. Our economy was shitting it. The reason why they thought it was all right is because they were young. They were young, full of dreams, full of hopes. They could get out of a chair without creaking or groaning. They could climb up the stairs without having to have a break halfway up. You know, that's what they were remembering. That's your rose-tinted glasses. When you think, oh, things were better in my day. No, they weren't. You were better in your day. Things were shit. Actually, I am going to say, though, having said that, things were better in my day because things are now objectively worse. But generally speaking, things have got better over time. I do think we're going backwards right now. I think over the last 15 years, we've gone backwards. But there's absolutely zero reason to believe that support for rejoining the EU will not just grow and grow and grow. Trevor, they're saying, it's sheer luck. The police turned up. Apparently an officer at the early murder suggested that the other senator's home was checked. Oh, yeah, I gathered that, yes. The second one, it was, I think they were in the, although the second one was the one that was successful. I think they were in the process of checking just as a precaution indeed. Could there be a point where first past the post with multiple splits could result in completely unpredictable outcomes? Yes, that is happening now. You've got experts, political as in you know, not political commentators, but you know, political scientists is the word I was trying to think of, say that is the situation right now. So it's not that some point in the future, Gerda, we'll have it where elections are completely unpredictable. That is the situation now. Try to remember the reason why there was an inevitability about Labour winning the last election was because of several factors. First of all, the Conservatives were deeply unpopular. People just wanted to get rid of them. Labour were the only alternative. No one believed Reform UK were going to sweep to power. Labour were the only alternative. Labour at the time, of course, had not been in power for 14 years, so they'd have like 3 different leaders since then, so they'd completely resurrected their image. You know, all of these things helped Labour win. At the next election, Labour are the incumbents. If a lot of people still don't think they're doing well enough, even if you can get them to say, oh yeah, things are better, but are they good enough? And now, if polling remains as it is, and there's good reasons to suppose it may not be, but if it does remain as it is, Reform UK will be able to credibly claim they could win an outright election, and then you could have a government that isn't either Labour or the Conservatives. Why go for one of the proven failures, they could say? And, you know, if the Green Party sort themselves out, that actually helps Reform UK to challenge as well. So that would help. So if you had a massive splitting of the left-wing vote, that would help Reform UK as well. So you could have a very, very unpredictable outcome at the next election. The conditions already exist there. The only thing that booked those conditions last time was the fact that Labour were sort of shiny new effectively, because it'd been 14 whole years since they were last in power, completely new people, almost exclusively. And the Conservatives had done so badly, that people just wanted them gone and they almost didn't care who they were replaced with. Derek there said they remembered life before Thatcher and blamed the EU instead of the Tories. Now they can only blame the Tories. There is an element of that in some parts of the country as well, of course, because there's a very strong coalition between Brexit support and people who hated Thatcher, which is really weird that they support Nigel Farage when he professes to be Thatcher's biggest fan. But yeah, she did a lot of damage to a lot of industrial and coastal towns, particularly industrial towns in the north of England and the North Midlands, parts of Scotland and so on. And Wales. So yeah, yeah, there is that as well. But anyway, Fosilla, just the last one we'll go on here, going back to America. Like this headline during the week, Florida finding child labour can't replace immigrant labour. I was shocked. Yeah, I mean, I did a video a little while ago. I was thinking of talking about that actually, but events somewhat took over, shall we say. I did a video about the fact that Ron DeSantis was saying, we'll just get kids to work, and you know they can work all night and go to school the next day or something. Don't matter if they're too tired, because yeah, replace immigrants with child labour was basically the plan. Madness, absolutely insane. These people, insane. I mean, my advice, if I could give one piece of advice to the population at large, any population at large, because you know I'm biased, I'm partisan, and people have got different views and they want to vote for different things. But if I could give one piece of advice to everyone, no matter what their political views were, it would be this. Politicians may shit on people. You know, all politicians will shit on some people, right? And quite a lot of people sort of want them to do that. But what I would say is this. Don't vote for someone who makes a big part of their offer shitting on people. You know, you might think that they will do, but are they boasting about it? Like even now, Labour, you know, you will say, they're sort of shitting on disabled people and trans people. Are they boasting about it? No. Don't vote for the people who are boasting about it. That's what I would say. If you do that, you'll still end up with shit politicians, but at least can we stop having malevolent ones? I would also possibly argue this, but I can't. From a practical point of view, I would also say, can we not elect politicians who went to public school? Which for Americans, by the way, doesn't mean state school. That's the opposite. A public school is like a private school, but it's like the posh private schools. The proper see you next Tuesday farms. But that's not fair, because a democracy has to be, you know, of the people, by the people, for the people. That includes people who went to public school. So I can't say that. You know, there's nothing wrong with people from a public education background becoming an MP. We shouldn't have as many of them, but you can't say we can't have any. But I would say, please do not vote for people who actually make a virtue out of the fact they're going to shit on people. You know, politicians will prioritise some groups over others, sometimes fairly, sometimes not fairly. Don't vote for the ones who actually just maliciously wants to shit on people. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for coming on everyone. Have a really good evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.